Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lecture for manual powertrains, Auto 105. Today, we're going to talk about Chapter 2, which is going to piggyback on where we left off with Chapter 1. We're going to look at vehicle, customer, and service information with a heightened focus on vehicle identification numbers, or the VIN. Why this is important is when we look at ordering parts or finding the proper service information for a vehicle, having the VIN to be able to distinguish exactly what we have on the vehicle is really important. There's not only the VIN itself, but there's also going to be the build sheet that goes along with the vehicle and what options that it has. And those options, along with that VIN, will allow us to order the correct parts. Even though a vehicle might be a specific year, there is different breakdowns on what factory it was assembled at, if there was a mid-year change, if it was going into a new model run. All of those details can affect how you get the correct parts. I can definitely tell you now, working in the industry, it's a lot more difficult to get accurate parts, way more than it used to be. So having that proper information is really important. We're also going to be looking at other information and documentation that the vehicle can have to aid in you repairing and diagnosing the vehicle. Some of those include, owner's manual, shop manual, the repair order, obviously, looking at what the customer's complaint is, and then any other applicable documents like recalls and service bulletins. Now, let's start with the vehicle's VIN. The vehicle's VIN is a unique number that all vehicles sold in North America are going to have. It is a 17-digit alphanumeric meaning that it's made up of letters and numbers, and they are all unique for each and every vehicle. So no vehicle has the same VIN. They can have similar number sequences. For instance, the first 9 numbers of the VIN can be similar from car to car, but the last 8 are unique to every car. And when you combine that with the somewhat unique 9 alphanumeric string, you get unique VIN numbers for every vehicle. The VIN number is going to be specifically located in a couple of spots and then non-specifically located in others. Now, what I just said doesn't sound like it makes much sense, but in North America, we mandate that the VIN must be posted visibly from the windshield on the left lower corner of the dash. So very often you can walk up to a vehicle and you can see the VIN number right there. The VIN number usually is also located inside of the door on a door sticker and sometimes under the hood on what's called the VCI sticker or the vehicle emissions sticker. Manufacturers can put the VIN in multiple areas though. Typically, if it's a framed vehicle, so like a pickup truck, for instance, it will have the frame stamped somewhere on the frame, usually in 2 to 3 spots. That way, if the frame gets cut apart and rewelded together, you're able to find that. And there are secret spots that VINs can be stamped. This is something that is very important to try to mitigate vehicle theft and then re-identifying the vehicle, meaning you get rid of the VINs and you put a new VIN on the vehicle so that it is a new vehicle to the system, as it were. Now, the VIN number is going to stay with the vehicles its entire life. Think of it like a social security number, that your social security number should theoretically stay with you your entire life. So you can look up repair history and origins of the vehicle and so on and so forth. Now, VIN numbers weren't always standardized. The standardization or the International Standard Organization, or ISO, came out with the 3779 standard in 1977, but was revised to what we know now as the 17-digit alphanumeric code. For instance, my 1964 Ford, it has what's called a warranty number. Now, that is its serial number on, that Ford has given it from the production line, but it's a unique number only that Ford has. And so it's not comparable to a similar year and similar platform Chevrolet, for instance. The standardization came out for the need when we needed to properly register vehicles and have, trackable history of that registration. Now, whenever the vehicle is registered or sold, the VIN is kept with the vehicle and the VIN moves with the vehicle. So license plates don't. License plates can change, but the VIN does. Now, why this is important? Well, if, for instance, the vehicle is a salvage or a total write-off, then that stays with that VIN and that goes in the system to where anyone that's buying the vehicle can pay the DMV to let them know that that vehicle is a salvage. Now, what does salvage mean? Well, salvage can mean it got in a really bad collision, and to repair it was worth more than what the vehicle's, book value was at the time. It can be flooded, it could be fire damage, it could be a theft recovery, it could be lemon law. Even we talked about lemon law in chapter one. That qualifies as a salvage title, and there's a bunch of different things that fall under that kind of term. But i.e., salvage title means that the vehicle's value is not the same as what it once was. Now, there's totally the possibility that you can repair a vehicle above board standard. And even though it's salvaged, the vehicle is of a higher quality than it was when it left the factory. It still needs to be known to any potential buyers of that vehicle. Let's look at how this numbering system is set in place. Again, and I want to make sure this is clear. This is an alphanumeric system, meaning that it's going to be a series of numbers and letters. And there's a couple different standards that we can go off of. There's a North American standard, which is in A, and then there is the ISO standard or the 3779. Those are going to be for foreign built vehicles. Now, there is a big difference between, a vehicle built and manufactured in the United States and a vehicle built overseas. So, for example, you can buy a Ford Transit van that is built in Spain or Poland, and that would have a B or an ISO VIN. Even though it is a Ford, and Ford is a North American company, it was a foreign built vehicle that was then shipped here. But you can have a Hyundai Sonata, for instance, that is built in Alabama, that would have a North American VIN. As what A is, even though Hyundai is a South Korean company. So it is important when we're looking at all this vehicle information. One of the key things you want to look at is where the vehicle's origin was. Now, just because a vehicle is manufactured in a particular country, in whatever country it happens to be, that doesn't mean that all of the components came from that factory and or that country. Vehicles are very much a global affair. In fact, at the dealership, this is a bit of a tangent, but at the dealership, we have been selling parts to a company that remanufactures transmissions. So what they do is they take transmissions that are blown or bad or need a rebuild, and then they send them to Malaysia, and they send the parts to Malaysia as well, to where they're rebuilt, reconditioned, and then retagged as a remanufactured part, which is a very standard operation in the automotive world, and then shipped back. So that transmission is doing two cross-specific travels, as well as the components that we're shipping with the transmissions to rebuild them, probably also too came from other parts of the world. So there's a likelihood that the components that you're getting ready to put in your vehicle have done more traveling than you'll ever do in a lifetime. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is one of those things that you do want to take into consideration when you're ordering parts, because you may have a vehicle that was built in a certain time that got parts from one factory on one part of the world. And then if it was a couple months later, they changed vendors and it went to another one. And there can be some small characteristics that the parts can't interlink or be swapped over. So again, those are things that you do want to kind of look into. But let's look at decoding a North American VIN. So we're going to use the example of a VIN that is top there on the screen. This VIN right here would be considered, kind of a generic. Whoops. Okay, I can't highlight. Never mind. A generic VIN that you would see on a vehicle. Our first letter in the number sequence, whether or not it is a world VIN or whether or not it is a North American VIN, is going to be the country of origin. So this is a number or letter that designates where the vehicle was manufactured, not the components, but where the vehicle was assembled. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, on North American VINs, number one means the vehicle was built in the United States. A number two indicates it was made in Canada. And then every other country has different letters. So J for Japan, Z is used for Italy, as an example. And that is going to tell you where that vehicle was manufactured. The second digit is going to designate what the manufacturer is. So in this case, it's a G for General Motors. Ford's use F. Uh, Chrysler's, it depends. It changes from vehicle to vehicle. A lot of them are using C's for Chrysler, but you can also have R's and J's for Jeeps. But it depends. A lot of them are going to stick with the C. And then the third is going to what division. So by division, you're looking at Toyota can also have a division that's known as Lexus. They had Scion for a little bit. Honda has Acura. GMC can have the truck division or the car division, and that can break down that nomenclature. The fourth digit or fourth character in this alphanumeric series can be used for details on what kind of vehicle it is. So in the case of what we're talking about with manual transmissions, it indicates that it is for a ZR1 Corvette. Now, the custom 3RZ manual means that it was a custom ordered vehicle or a vehicle that was ordered by a customer at the dealership and not a vehicle that was put through the sequence and came through the assembly line on its own. The sixth character is going to dictate what kind of body type: two-door, four-door, sedan, pickup truck, van, convertible, so on and so forth. The seventh character indicates the type of seat. And this is meaning like, is it 2 seats, 4 seats, and effectively it's how many airbags, how many seat belts are in there. So for instance, a Nissan Cube is sold here in the United States as a 5-passenger vehicle, but it was delivered in Japan as a 7-passenger, a bench in the front, a bench in the back, and then a jump seat in the rear. However, those cannot be brought in, even though the Cube was sold here. You cannot bring a 7-seater in because that doesn't fall under our safety requirements. The eighth character goes into what type of engine it has, and it's usually going to go off of the displacement and what type of fueling system it has going along with it. The ninth character is going to be used for internal manufacturing. Oftentimes, this is going to be a plant code. So, because we're talking about a Corvette, they're all made in the same plant in Kentucky. But if this was, for instance, a Toyota Tacoma, depending on where you are in the country, can be made in different plants. My truck, my 64 Ford, if I go back to that, it was made in the San Jose plant. Now, there was 4 other plants across the United States that you could get F-Series pickup trucks built. But because my truck was a San Jose truck, there's different parts and options that my truck has that the other trucks don't have, and vice versa. Like, for instance, you couldn't have gotten a big window option in my at that plant, so I couldn't have gotten the bigger rear glass to where you could get that in other plants. But again, that's going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. The 10th character starts to begin the uniqueness of that. Remember, the last 8 digits are all going to be unique, and they tend to not have any letters. They tend to usually have the first 2 can be letters, or the first one is a letter, but then the remaining ones is going to be a number sequence. Going from there, they list effectively the serial number. So in this case, the 11th number or the 10th number, sorry. In this case, the 11th number is going to be the plant for this particular vehicle, and then the last 6 are going to be the unique serial number that goes along in the sequence that these vehicles were made. I brought up the VCI sticker, or the Vehicle Emissions Control Information sticker. This is going to be found under the hood. Typically, it's either on the underside of the hood or sometimes on the radiator cowl. I've also seen them on the inner fender tags, but it has to be easily accessible for a emissions technician to be able to find it. This can have the VIN on it, although it doesn't always. A lot of times the VIN will be able to be scanned via the barcode. The barcode will also have the unique information in terms of the emission standards. So the year that the vehicle emission standards are meant for. So this vehicle may have been built in late 2010, but it was built to meet 2011 emission standards. Then the EPA classification This is a LDV or a low emissions vehicle tier two, and then for California, which a lot of manufacturers have they kind of defaulted to the California standards because the California standards make a lot more sense than the federal standards. On top of California buys more cars than almost all the entire country combined. So when you look at, like a state like Wyoming, for instance, Orange County sells more cars than Wyoming does. So the California standards are kind of what manufacturers will build a vehicle to. That's that third line. The engine displacement, which it does have a group coding, and that group coding also goes with the evaporative emission systems, and then the system is also OBD2 compliant. Now, what does that mean for manual transmissions? Well, it doesn't mean much except for you do have the possibility for more labor op codes. We talked about that in the prior lecture to be able to get paid a little bit more based off of if the vehicle meets some of these standards. Now, as brought up, there's a couple pieces of information that we're missing from that tag that we had as an example. In some cases, if it is a spark ignition system, it may give the spark plug number. So whatever the factory spark plug number is that it came with from the factory, plus the gap or the amount of space in between the electrode. And then we can also have two if it got any type of outside certification for if it's a fleet vehicle. Now, one thing that I like to do is if you install anything that's aftermarket that can be modifying the emission systems and it has a CARB sticker, put that next to the VCI sticker. That way a smog tech can see it really quick. Now, I have had some smog techs where they're a little bit difficult and they choose to want or they specify that it has to be on the part. um, Usually you can't go wrong with it next to the VCI sticker so they can see it. This usually there's enough space under the hood if that's the case. Now we can also have on the door, we can have VIN information that also corresponds with the vehicle's weight. Now this will be important for ordering parts, especially for driveline components, because based off of the vehicle's weight, if it's a towing package or a non-towing package, or what weight classification it is, will help you determine what diff parts you need to get, or T-case or transmission parts. But this will be found in the driver's door sill area. Now, the door sill area can be the B pillar or the lower section of where the floor seam is, but quite often it's going to be on the B pillar or it will be on the corresponding reveal section of the door where the latch is. It'll be on that as well. It will again give the 17-digit alphanumeric VIN. It will also have the actual date that the vehicle was built. This is probably the most important part. So this is the actual date that it was built. Now, if we look, that last sticker showed that it was a 2011, but this is a late build 2010. So it was built in September of 2010. That's important for recalls and for TSBs because oftentimes they will have restrictions based off of when the vehicle was built. So yes, it is a little bit misleading that it was a vehicle built in the latter half of 2010, but it's being sold as an 11. But you got to remember it's being sold as a model year 11. And in fact, manufacturers don't have to have any really standardization on model year. If a manufacturer wanted to come out with a 2030 model, they could. But the manufacturing date would have to be the month and year that it was manufactured. Some manufacturers will go as far as give you the day, but it's not that common. Usually it's just going to be the month and the year. For a rule of thumb, some of you might be thinking, well, how can I determine if it's going to be a model year ahead? Usually manufacturers won't come out with vehicles that are a model year ahead until July or August. That's usually the earliest. However, that's not a set thing. Couple years back, there was in 2009, there was issues with Toyotas that were a result of the floor mats getting stuck on the gas pedal, and that caused them to accelerate without the drivers necessarily wanting them to. Hyundai, I was working for at the time, as well as Chrysler. Hyundai looked at that as an opportunity that they could probably take some of the market share from Toyota. So they pushed through the new 2011 model year Hyundai Sonatas, so they would come out in late 2009. So there actually wasn't a 2000 model year 2010 Hyundai or Kia. So Sonata for the Hyundai and then Optima for the Kia. Instead, there was a 2009 model year, and then it went to 2011. And you were buying cars possibly at the very tail end of 2009, but were model year 2011. So which is a little bit weird, but again, that that manufacturing date is really, really important. You also have the gross vehicle weight. Now, this is split into two sections, and this is front and rear. So our front is on top, and then the rear is on the lower portion. You add those two together to get the full weight of the vehicle. And in some cases, they will have that as well on the sticker. There will also be a sticker usually to the left or the right of this same VIN sticker, and that is going to be the door placard size. Now and that is going to be the tire placard. Now the tire placard is going to be important because it's going to come with the recommended size of tire, the tires that came installed on the vehicle. Now for all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles, having a matched set or square set of wheels and tires is going to be crucially important. If that is not the case, you can have the risk of a transfer case blowing up. And when I mean blowing up, I don't mean like actually exploding, but what I mean is failing prematurely and that resulting in having to replace the transfer case. It's very common on Grand Cherokees that have the non-selectable all-wheel drive system, and it's a $7,000 repair if it's not done correctly, or if the tire size is not correct, and that then causes the vehicle to slip the clutch inside of the transfer case. You can also have two where a vehicle might be marked as incomplete. These are typically chassis cab vehicles. These are going to be vehicles that are going to be incomplete from the factory. So think of like the trucks without a bed on them, that might be getting an ambulance box or a tow bed or a flatbed or whatever it might be. Those GVWs or gross vehicle weights will be incomplete and they may give an estimation. So, for instance, I see a lot of these vehicles working for Chrysler because I work on the Ram line of trucks, and we can get those where it will say incomplete vehicle GVW 19,000 pounds. And that's because the chassis is not rated for anything more than 19,000 pounds. So the max weight that vehicle potentially can be is 19,000. But it doesn't always mean that that's the case. The truck might have an all aluminum flatbed, and it might be far below that weight standard. One other detail that you're going to be able to use to help you with ordering parts and for getting the right information for a vehicle is this is often called the Moroni sheet or the build sheet of the vehicle. So I've pulled up a VIN and there is a series of codes that make up what the vehicle was built with. And there's two sections. There's going to be standard equipment and then optional equipment. So you can see this Jeep Wrangler was built with quite a few different things, and they can be real small things like cargo tie downs as an option. But for our argument's sake, for what we're looking for, you'd use this to try to find the gear ratio. So we can see that this came with a 321 rear axle ratio, and that we have the Dana 30 solid front axle. And a conventional diff, and that information would be needed for you to be able to identify or properly identify what the vehicle came with instead of having to take it apart and look at it that way. And then you can go down to standard or optional equipment, and this is anything that was optional. So how there's the standard price and then there's the option price. These were all the things that could be added to it from the factory. If there was special equipment added, so if there was like a lift, there was a factory or a Mopar lift, but it was a dealer added or side steps or stuff like that, that goes in the special equipment or dealer installed equipment. And this vehicle does actually have a dealer installed piece of equipment, and it is the electronic tracking system, i.e. a GPS system for if the vehicle gets stolen. And one of the biggest assets that you can have in a shop is going to be proper service manuals. Factory manuals are going to be the most robust and the best for a vehicle if you can get those. But there's a bunch of aftermarket manuals and electronic manuals that work really well. But what this is going to give you is this is going to give you all of the information in terms of torque, the process of doing repairs, standard operations, diagnostic flow charts, you name it, it can fall under this area. Uh, Repair manuals can be paper. However, the industry has moved away from that. I did buy, so the last set of paper factory manuals I bought for my own personal vehicle was for my 2000 Tacoma. Now, that was when they were still offering paper ones, but we've long since gone away from that. And in fact, our old building that we were at, an old ATAS here on campus, we had like what we called the library, and it was just bookshelf after bookshelf of paper repair manuals. We've since moved on to electric manuals, to where it's all computerized, and it's a little bit more standardized, a little bit easier to find. Aftermarket manuals work really well too. These Chilton books, they're usually the Chilton books, or the Hayes manuals, or Haynes manuals. Excuse me, I said it wrong. They're going to show step by step on how they have found to repair the vehicle, but it won't necessarily always be factory based. Now, this information that you can get from these manuals, is really based off of what repair you're doing and how deep you're willing to look. So computerized ones, oftentimes you're going to need to make sure that you have an understanding of navigating the repair manual. So if we look at a factory service manual, so I'm looking at the service library for Stellantis Group, I'm looking up that Jeep Wrangler. I can go in and look up a bunch of different information and service information. So if I go to transmission, I can then pull up. So I'm on a factory manual for a Jeep Wrangler. That's the Stellantis one. To kind of give you an example of what a factory one is. All of you have taken other classes with us that you've seen the aftermarket ones on Motor All Data, Mitchell, or Identifix. But this is what a factory one looks like. So you can go through and I can select different areas. So in this case, I'm selecting manual transmission, and I can look at the disassembly portion of it. Now this is going to go through every step to disassemble the transmission. It will also give you a section for the special tools needed. So we'll need fixture 9633 and then remover of the housing 96 or 9636. And then it shows the entire process. Remove the shifter, remove the reverse switch, seals, and how this transmission's all going to come apart and all the different components that go along with that. You also have the removal stage of it too, how you're going to get this transmission out of the vehicle, how you're going to reinstall the transmission back into the vehicles. And then any specifications. We have specifications based off of the torque that it's going to be under, as well as the gear ratios and the actual, what each component is going to do. We have another subsection for technical service bulletins. So in this case, there's not going to be any technical service bulletins for manual transmissions, but differentials we can look in. But for different areas, we can look in and see, that there is, technical service bulletins. Now, technical service bulletins are there because there is an abundance of these type of repairs and the manufacturers recognizing that, and they are giving a guideline to repairing the vehicle. It doesn't mean that every vehicle gets this. It also doesn't mean that a customer is owed this repair. It's a guideline. A recall, however, so this being a technical service bulletin, a little bit different standardization on how it's worded. If we look at a recall, for instance, a recall is going to be something that has to be done. So this is a manufacturer safety or emissions recall that is going to give, kind of details on what the repair is, give you the parts, and then it's going to give you how you're going to go through and repair this particular component and how you're going to inspect it and or replace the worn component. TSBs, again, are a really, really big benefit to diagnosing and repairing a vehicle. But I do want to make sure that it's clear that there's going to be specific guidelines based off of your make model, possibly the plant that it was built in, possibly other finite details that need to be looked at. Now, TSBs are meant to be publicly known. The manufacturer has to allow them to be circulated at no cost to others. So you can Google search a lot of TSBs and they can come up. That being said, you usually have to fight through all the ads to be able to find it, usually like halfway down the screen at that point. But they do give you a guideline for common repair issues, and often they will give you updated parts. So in the case of the technical service bulletin that we looked at, it gives you an option for new cooler lines if this was an automatic transmission. Recalls again are going to fall under two camps. It's either going to be a emissions recall or a safety recall. In terms of what we're dealing with in manual drive lines, they're all going to possibly be for safety related concerns. There will be some emissions related concerns that may fall in line with that, but it's always going to be safety. Now, these recalls will be at no cost to the customer, and the manufacturer has to make in good faith effort secondary transportation, i.e., a loaner or a shuttle or a Uber voucher for the customer to be able to have secondary transportation while their vehicle is being repaired. And it's a non-uncommon thing now. It used to be prior to 2000, recalls were pretty rare, and it was kind of a big deal that a manufacturer would come out with a recall. However, now vehicles will have multiple recalls. In fact, I have worked on some vehicles that have a recall that's recalling a recall that recalled a recall. So there's three recalls for the same thing. Why manufacturers do this is it actually results in higher customer loyalty, which sounds kind of strange initially, but will make sense here in a second. What it's doing is it's showing the customer that the manufacturer cares and is offering a service for free. And everyone loves free stuff, right? The repair is at no cost. There's going to be some sort of secondary transportation at no cost. In some cases, they may get a gift card or like a meal voucher for it for the recall. And then it also brings the people into the dealership. Only dealerships can do recalls. Private shops or independent shops can do technical service bulletins, but only dealerships can do recalls. What that allows is often the service drive is connected to the sales department. So if a customer has a 3-year-old vehicle, they, while they're waiting for their vehicle to be written up or while they're waiting for the vehicle to be repaired, they can look at what the new model is. And I've had this happen. This manufacturers do this as a strategy, and I've literally had it happen where a vehicle comes in for several recalls, and while you're doing the recall, a car salesman walks out to verify the mileage and to verify that the vehicle's here. The customer traded it in while I'm in the middle of doing the repair, and they're getting a newer model. And it's happened quite a bit of times that's been the case, more often than not, oddly enough. So it is a way to build customer loyalty and to bring customers back into the dealership. In some cases, recalls, as I stated, have to be done. And what I mean by that is the manufacturer has to uphold them, but then the customer or the owner of the vehicle also has to get them done. And in some cases, it's non-voluntary. You have to bring your vehicle in or you cannot register it. I have had customers red in the face, mad right off the bat because they're down the service drive and they need a recall done to their vehicle and they're pissed off because they hate the dealership. They think we're all thieves and they think it's a scam. I literally had a guy, there's a recall on Dodge Chargers and Challengers to replace a timing chain guide. The one that was installed on the vehicle is plastic and they break very easily, and it replaces it with an aluminum one. So we remove the timing cover, you get a new timing chain, timing gear, timing tensioner, and timing guide, and then it gets re-put back together, as well as an oil change gets done for free on the vehicle. No cost to the customer. The customer is given a rental car for 2 days. This guy was not having it. He was pissed off. He thought we were all thieves, thought it was a scam, had nothing but 4-letter expletives to say to us. That he couldn't register his vehicle and yada 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 yada. And that's that 2% of customers you're never going to please out there in the industry. But it is one of those things that is a requirement. One of my former students was one of the people that worked on the Takata airbag recall, and he would struggle trying to get people to come into the dealership. And certain states, you can still register your vehicle, Florida being one of them. And he had a situation where a guy was refusing to bring the vehicle in for the recall. They were trying to track him down for 7 years to get this recall done, and he was refusing to. They were incentivizing him with cash. I forget what the total was at some point, but it was a considerable amount to where it's like, yeah, shoot, I'll go in and get the recall done for however much cash it is. Uh, the guy ended up getting in a car accident and dying because the airbag failed. Takata at that point is not liable for that death because they had done so many incentives to try to get the person in, but there's no mechanism to force it. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, we live in a state in California that they will not allow you to register your vehicle. In other parts of the country, you can, but if a manufacturer's coming out with a recall, there's probably a reason for that. So you need to get them done. Now, labor guide. Now, what is a labor guide? Well, a labor guide is breaking down how much time you're going to get paid for that job if you're doing this as a charged service. It will also give a guide to the customer to kind of show that there's a standardization with that. Let's look at what some of these labor times can look like. So I put in that same Jeep Wrangler that we were looking at, put the VIN in for that, and we're looking at clutch replacement, specifically the clutch disc. So we have a couple different times that we can have here. So the warranty time is right here at 3.7 hours, and our customer pay, or what you would pay at a private shop, is 5.9 hours. Now, why is there a discrepancy between the two? Well, the way that it breaks down is there is a perceived advantage for a dealership technician. They have the factory tools and they've also done the repair multiple times. That time is based off of a time study that the manufacturer does, where they have a technician do the same repair 3 times in a row and they take an average of that time. And now that is time that he or she is working on the vehicle. If they go take a lunch break or they go to change their tools, the timer stops. Inherently, it is unfair. I can say that as a 20-year dealer technician, you can beat the time on a lot of things, but you've had to done it multiple times and you have to have the experience to be able to do so. Why customer pay is going to be a little bit more is it's perceived that that person does not have the factory training and has not done this multiple times, and they're going to get paid more, and thus there's a little bit more time that goes along with that. They're also usually not charging the customer the same labor rate that a dealership would, so they make up for that with a higher rate. The other thing that I want to point out is that there's additional times. So you can see that right here we have 2/10, 2/10, and 3/10. And this is going to be corresponding with additional repairs. So add a new pilot bearing, R&R the flywheel. If it has skid plates, those all correspond with those additional times. This is where it's important when I brought up documenting everything. You need to document that you replaced the flywheel. That gets you an extra 2/10. If it has skid plates, an extra 3/10. It's an extra half an hour. Doesn't seem like much. And I know you're thinking like, oh, big half an hour, whatever. It adds up in the end. And trust me, you want to fight for every tenth. To explain too what a tenth is, for those of you that don't know, it's a tenth of an hour. So you're looking at 6 minutes. So in that 6 minute time, you should be able to do a 1/10 job. So for example, the flywheel pays 2/10. You should be able to, with the transmission already removed and the clutch removed, remove the flywheel, clean and prep the surfaces, clean and prep the new flywheel, install the new flywheel, and torque it to spec within 12 minutes. If you can do it in 8 minutes, you get paid for 12 minutes. If it takes you 20 minutes, you still only get paid for 12 minutes. So you're at a deficit at that point. So in the case of flagging hours versus just straight time, you can have an advantage. So there are some days when I will leave work and I have flagged more hours than there are in the day. My record I've flagged more than this. When I've done like a frame repair, I don't count those because those are astronomical amount of hours and it takes multiple days, sometimes weeks to do. But the most I've ever flagged in a normal day, bell to bell, so start to finish, was 33.2 hours for a day, right? So I was getting paid for more hours than there were in the day. That being said, the day prior, I flagged nothing. I flagged a goose egg, and that was because I was getting everything ready for the next day. So there you take it, as an average. So hopefully you're averaging a little bit more than what the day comes with, but it is something that you need to build up your skills and experience and your knowledge, and that's hopefully why you're all here to be able to flag more hours. Something that I am going to require you all to do on a lot of these task sheets that you're going to be doing in lab is to look up the labor times. Now, why I want you to do that is you as a mechanic are responsible for keeping track of your own hours. And trust me, the dealerships or the independent shops will short you on hours. And that is money literally taken out of your pocket. You need to keep a log of what you're doing every day, and you need to have an idea of what you're flagging hours wise. So I'm trying to get you all in the habit now before you go in the industry to be able to do this on your own. If you're not going in the industry and you're just wanting to do this as, a consumer, I want you to have an appreciation for those that get paid for this and why it costs so much money to get your car repaired. So it's kind of two-fronted with that. Now, all of this comes in line with making sure we get the right parts. Parts are going to be the difficult thing to order for a vehicle, and going off of the VIN and the manufacturer build date is going to be really paramount to be able to do that. A lot of times, the parts individual that you're going to be dealing with doesn't have a knowledge on how to repair that particular vehicle, and we'll need your help as a mechanic to look that up. I almost always look up my own part numbers when I order parts. I 95% of the time I do that, and the reason is then the buck stops with me. If the wrong part was ordered and it wasn't a fault on the ordering process, and it was I ordered the wrong part, it's my fault, and I can only be mad at myself, which is good. I tend to be mad at myself, but whatever. It is one of those things that you need to make sure that you are trying to get the right part. Saves you time, it'll make you money in the long run, and it'll make you more efficient, that you can get the job done in a timely manner and then move on to the next one. If it's for your own vehicle, it means your own vehicle is back up and running and you're not having to have the stress of not having a vehicle. If it's a customer's vehicle, it gets that vehicle done, you build up customer satisfaction, and then you can move on to another vehicle to again increase your paycheck. In a lot of cases, when we're looking at repairing manual transmissions and differentials, the factory information might be gone. And what I mean by that is time has not been nice to the information because it was printed out and there's really no records of it. The manufacturer doesn't keep it. Some manufacturers are really good at that. For instance, Mercedes and Porsche are two manufacturers that you can get any part that has ever been made for any Porsche or Mercedes. Any part, any model year, any make, whatever. Now, the cost is then prohibitive, right? You have to ask how much it's going to cost. You probably can't afford it. But they still have all the blueprints. It's part of their gig. In a lot of cases, you can get aftermarket manuals. And this may be the case if you're regearing your vehicle. You put bigger wheels and tires on it and you're regearing it. If you're going outside of the factory available gear ratios and you're going to like an extreme ratio, let's say you're doing like 581 gears or something like that, in the diffs, you will have to refer to the aftermarket manual that came with the gear so that you can set it up properly so that the gears live a good long life. Now, that concludes chapter 2. From this point forward, chapter 3, we're going to start to get into driveline fundamentals. This information may seem a little boring or nonchalant, but it's extremely important. It's extremely important to not only make you a more successful mechanic in the long run or very, very successful at repairing your own vehicles, but it does give you the ability to kind of have a way of streamlining the whole process, being able to get the right information to get the right parts and get it fixed the first time. I appreciate you watching to the end of the lecture, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next one.